grieving pretty deeply at a lot of the times, but also at times just embracing some of the things that came along with not having had children. So I'm really glad to be here with these fabulous women, and welcome to all the participants.
Thank you, Jackie. And Jackie's being very modest. She's also the author of a rather wonderful book. Would you like to plug your book, please?
I've written a book about my story, This Particular Happiness, a Childless Love Story.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Thank you very much. I was very proud
about that.
Yeah, I was very proud to write the foreword for that book as well. And it's a really beautiful book. Are you working on a new book?
I am. A novel.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Good for you.
Yeah. So next up on my screen is Kate Kaufman, also from Oregon, where there is something in the water. Yes.
There is truly something in the water, and I am especially pleased to be here because not only do I get to be on screen with Jody Day, who is a rock star in my world, but the very first person that I spoke to personally one-on-one about my experience of not having kids is also here, Sue Lick, who lived about an hour south of where I was on the coast. It was utterly by surprise that I learned that she was so close. And then a crucial connection for me is Karen Malone Wright, who created that amazing summit when really that bulk of having the opportunity to share our stories. And that's kind of my plug-in here is I went through infertility treatments unsuccessfully. And I moved after we stopped trying to a small rural community, which created the conditions for me to really be hard up to find people because there weren't any. And when I realized 15 to 20% of people didn't have kids, like, well, then I need to actually get very active about going out and finding these people. And so it became a sort of quest, which then I learned that all of us were kind of in the same boat. And so I got to gather a number of stories. Virtually all of them were the first time women had shared their stories. I got to steward their stories in my own book, and I don't have the prop, maybe I'll grab it later. Do you have kids? Life when the answer is no. And talk to women from their 20s up into their 90s. And yeah, so learned a lot.
Thank you, Kate. And I love your book. And for those watching, don't worry, you don't have to write all these book titles down and things like that. I will put them in the end credits when I edit the video and the links so that you can follow up on the speakers and follow their incredibly important work. So thank you so much, Kate. And welcoming for her first time on the Nomo Crones show, Sue Figaldi-Lick. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sue? And I just have to say, I'm a fan. I already have my copy of your new book.
I just got mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have mine here too.
Yeah.
How did Amazon get it to the UK so quickly? Okay, anyway, I'm Sue Figaldi-Lick, and I might be older than the rest of you. I'm 68, almost 69.
Me too.
Yeah, so be it. I live on the Oregon coast where it is raining and blowing like crazy, so please God, let the power and the Wi-Fi keep going. My first marriage, my first husband did not want to have kids. I didn't know that when we got together. We didn't really talk about it enough. We should have, but he did not want them. But then the marriage went south anyway because he had problems with drinking, infidelity, and such. But we divorced, and I still really wanted to have children. But when I met Fred, my second husband, he'd already had a vasectomy and he had 3 children, and that was enough for him. He didn't want to do babies again, and that is so common. And then he died. He died of Alzheimer's disease. So I wound up taking care of him for a long time. Now it's just me and my ailing dog, and he's in the hospital right now. And yeah. I wrote a book called Childless by Marriage. I had not seen anybody really speaking about childless where all your parts work, but you can't don't have a partner who is willing or able to have a child with you. So I don't have my books, they're in other rooms, but I have postcards. So this is the cover of Childless by Marriage. And I've been doing a blog on the subject for 13 years now and getting a lot of participation. You know, I'm so much older than most of the women who are writing to me, and men, mostly women. You know, most of them are in their 30s, early 40s, and sort of right in the crunch of the decision-making time. You know, should I stay in this situation? Should I try somehow to have a child? You know, so, you know, I try to put myself in their heads, and sometimes I just have to say, look, I'm so much older, you have to tell me what it's like, because they come from a different era and different situation. Recently, very recently, I put the blog post together in a new book called Love or Children When You Can't Have Both. I love this color.
Yeah, it's a great cover design.
Good cover.
Yeah, this is the first time I really hired a pro to do the cover. We were working with a brick red kind of color for a long time, and then I was like, what about teal? And, yeah, so that's my story. 68, widowed, no kids, no family in Oregon. This is where I'm at.
Thank you, Sue. It's really lovely to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now to Karen Malone Wright. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Jody. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Malone Wright. I am in almost the middle of the United States in Cleveland, Ohio, where it's rainy and drabby and the snow is melting. But it's actually sort of warm because climate change, you know. So I'm looking out on a December day and it's almost 50 degrees. It's very strange. I started the NotMom in 2012, which started as a blog, sort of became a resource website. But the thing about it was that I was locked into this idea that it didn't matter how you wound up without a child of your own. Your life is totally different than your girlfriends who have children. And it can be, depending on geography and luck, it can be very hard to find someone else, not only who doesn't have children, but hopefully close to your age, you know, I mean, whether they're single or not. And so I knew, at least knew that the wall that is between women who chose a life without children and women who didn't, I believed in my heart that that wall could come down if they could meet in person. And that's how we had the NotMom Summit in 2015 and repeated it in 2017. And we were all gearing up to just attack the brands out there who, you know, I went into my retirement money to make the second one happen because we just could not find sponsors who weren't afraid to piss off the mom world. You know, at that point it goes up and down, but I think at least in America, we're still just about 1 of every 6 women. And that's a scary number to piss off. Sorry for the air quotes. So now that we are, you know, quarantined and life is different, you know, I not a week goes by that I don't get an email from some woman saying, you know, oh my gosh, I would love to go to that. So who knows, maybe one day before I pass, I can pass on the NotMom Summit again. We looked into having it virtual, but you know, I mean, my staff is me and Laura Lavoie, and I don't have any money to pay anybody else, at least not right now. So, and I don't have the money to pay for the virtual software. So I'm not, plus virtual is not the same. Sorry to use up the time on that. Because the whole thing for me is getting the women offline, because online, if I am childless, not by choice, wasn't my idea, I wanted kids my whole life, all I have to do is see a headline online that says, I never wanted kids, and I won't open that story. I won't learn anything about that woman. I won't hear her voice and how she got to where she is. But when you're in a room together and then a hotel over 3 days, you can't help but see other people's pain. You can't help but understand how their head works. You can't help but realize, gee, I misjudged these folks. You know, it's a case by case, obviously, basis. It's a lot like race. So that's my story. I'm 65. I'm on Medicare. I don't know how I got here. And my crone celebrate. I am still working on acceptance of the word crone. But it basically makes me laugh. And I personally, and I said this the last time this group got together, I am having this natural hair journey so that every time you see me, I look, you know, depending, I mean, first I was sort of Celie in color purple, and now I'm Angela Davis. So that's all I got to say.
It's wonderful to have you here with us, Karen. And we've got an hour and a half today rather than an hour. So, you know, digressions are welcome. You know, we're here to have a chat. It could take us in so many directions. So feel free to, you know, take up space if you need it, any of us. Thank you. Lovely to have you here. Donna Ward in Melbourne, Australia. Good morning.
Good morning. And I just want to say I still haven't had coffee yet. So,
Oh my.
Tragic.
I know, bit of late riser, but yes, what do I say about myself? I've had many lives. I began life in, well, I was born in Peru, but that's a whole other story. And at a very young age, I think I was 4, I turned up in Western Australia, Perth, where my father's family was, and my mother's family was on the East Coast. So in those days, we didn't even have very good long distance calls. So she didn't see her family very much at all. I think it was handwritten letters. And I grew up there and came over to Melbourne in my 30s, and that was the crunch time for me, where I was looking for a husband. For me, I always feel that odd one out here, because for me, I didn't have that craving, that internal craving to have a child. But I did have a desire, if you like, to have a family, and that family, I knew that I wanted a partner to help me bring up children. And I wasn't finding someone to do that. Now, there were very nice men, but they usually ended up with someone else. Or there were men that I loved dearly who just were not father material, so, or even partner material in the end. So it became a kind of experience of what I call rejection repetition. And that took a good 10, 15 years to really kind of come to terms with, because I think in there's a lot of shame about not being lovable and not being good enough to be chosen for the team. And also there was the added rejection of all my friends going off and having families, and not that I had a problem with them doing that, because of course they were doing what I wanted to do. But what I had a problem was the void that was left, because family really does occupy your mind and puts friendships on hold. And so I was having a lot of grief in my 40s, and then my mother died. My father already died in my 30s. And so I kind of lost my family of origin as well. So it was, I would say, right up to my early 50s, 30s to 50s, real crunch time, really difficult to be in the world, really difficult to deal with so many layers of grief that had so many different kinds of complexities to them. And at that point, I decided to write a book about it. And it was, I've said this before, it was atrocious. And it was awful and boring, and I probably didn't really know how to write then. And so I put it in, and I was very frightened of what I call the fierce feminists, who just basically, and I'm going to say this politely in a way that they didn't say, is they sort of basically say, well, woman up and get on with it. And I'm beginning to feel that this might be a particularly Australian harshness, a kind of, you know, because there are a lot of Australian women have done life hard right from the beginning, right from colonial days. And there are many women who've done life differently. And the idea of having the usual family unit is only recent in our history. It's really only post-war, and it really only lasted for 15 years. But the idea that everyone is in a traditional family, albeit maybe living in two houses these days, managed to stretch it to there, just influences all our public policy and all our social interactions and all the programs that are around. And so COVID really shone a light on that. Anyhow, look, I got around to writing a book, which you've heard about, but I'll hold it up because that's what we're doing today. It's called She I Dare Not Name, the meditation, a spinster's meditations on life. And that's really where I'm coming from, that experience of living life without any family at all, and really just having community and friendship in your life. Oh, and work's pretty important. So I think that's about, I've taken enough of your time, really.
That was beautiful, and really touching, you know, for you to touch on such tender things, you know, so straight off the bat and so early in the morning without coffee.
Yeah, I need my coffee.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go straight to the whiskey. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Donna. And I'd also now like to introduce Maria Hill in America as well. Maria, welcome. We have you on mute, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I got taken out, and so I had to dial back in. It's nice to be here with everybody. Thank you, Jody, for doing this again. I guess it's been a while since we've been here. I'm in the DC area, and we're having a pretty lovely day, which is great. I grew up in New England. My mother was from Germany. My father was an American. They met during World War II. And it was very much a German household. And in a German household, the woman stays home and has children. And that is put on a pedestal for that. And if you go to work as a mother, they call you a Rabenmutter, a raven mother, basically like you're basically eating your children if you go to work or something to that. But, you know, they've got that very old thing around motherhood. And I stepped out of that. I was the oldest, and I stepped out of that. I went to college and expected to work. Of course, I grew up in the United States, and it was at a time when women were starting to go out to work. We had just liberalized our divorce laws, so you couldn't assume you would be supported. So I was going out to work, and it never occurred to me that I wouldn't have children, although I just never thought it wouldn't happen. It just wasn't the top priority, because in those days, we saw what happened to women who had children who were getting a divorce, and they were being thrown out basically without any support. And it took a good 20 years before we really had national child support system. So it took a very long time. And I saw that going on. So I was focused on work and, you know, trying to make sure that, you know, I could support myself. And so eventually I did get married, and my husband had children. And again, I never assumed that we wouldn't have children of our own, but his ex-wife was very aggressive in pursuing us for money. And we ended up in 6 figures worth of debt for legal bills. So it was a very rough time. And when we got through all that, my husband agreed to have children. And then when it became possible for us to try through IVF, he said he reneged. And so that plunged me into a lot of grieving. And I eventually, you know, had to start over. I went to art school and started my website for sensitive people, which is what I do. I have a website, Sensitive Evolution, and I've written the book, The Emerging Sensitive. And of course, I work on Gateway as a moderator. I mean, I don't work, it's a fun thing I do to encourage other people. I have a soft spot for people who are disenfranchised in one way or another. So certainly childless women and also sensitive people and empaths are very disenfranchised and treated as not okay. And so I have a very strong soft spot for people like that. And a shout out for our program coming up on Monday, We have a series of articles. I call it the Empowerment Guide for Sensitive People. And we're starting Monday through Friday for the 3 weeks in January. And Jody has a brilliant article coming out on the 11th. And so I hope everybody will read it. I will be putting it on the Gateway site and also around on social media. But all the articles are brilliant this year. Everyone really put their heart and soul into it. So for sensitive people, it's worth taking a look and sharing.
Thank you
So
so much,
thanks,
Maria. And I believe Maria is our eldest wise elder here.
Oh yeah, I'm 73.
Yes. Yeah. And she is, as she said, she is Gateway Women's resident wise elder.
I'll try to be wise, no guarantees.
I feel like you've been there almost from the beginning with me. It feels like, you know, we've, you know, the Gateway Women community started on our old Google Plus group back in 2012 and, you know, transitioned to Mighty Networks last year. But Maria has been with me all along.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful. I've learned so much from you. And I know you are much beloved.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. It's a pleasure for me.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
I feel like I'm taking a sliver out of the lion's paw. All those little things that hurt, that cause us to suffer so much. I'm always trying to pull that out. So it's kind of fun doing that.
That is such a beautiful way to see it. That's just lovely. Thank you. So welcome to all of our participants. There are lots and lots of you. I wanted to let you know that the chat is open. You can send a chat to just the panelists or to all of the panelists and attendees. Just to let you know, I'm flying the Zoom control deck on my own, so it's difficult for me to kind of read the chat and do everything. But if you see me kind of looking over there like that, I'm not sort of, you know, I haven't lost interest in you all. I'm just reading the chat.
Not over there checking your phone, huh?
There's also a Q&A button. If at the bottom of the screen, you can click on and you can ask an anonymous question there. I also want to let you know that the chat is not part of the recording. So whatever you put in the chat won't actually sort of go on and be part of the recording. So you could be quite anonymous in there, or you can just ask something in the Q&A. We will leave some space for Q&As at the end. Now we have sort of 5, in a way, subjects we wanted to cover that come from interests of our own around this. But they're only really kind of signposts to the discussion, just to help us to sort of frame our thinking, because we could probably talk for a very long time and it would be very interesting, but we all have other things to do as well. Coffee to have, whiskey to have. So I think I just really love this quote to open it. And this is from Marion Woodman, big wise elder. The late Marion Woodman. What does it mean to be an elder in this culture? What are my new responsibilities? What has to be let go to make room for the transformations of energy that are ready to pour through the body soul? And for me, as someone at 56 who is very much on the threshold of elderhood, that's kind of where I am. It's like some of those things are starting to happen to me, and some of them are on the horizon. And as I started to move towards this threshold, I realized very much as when I was dealing with the threshold of not becoming a mother, I found myself looking around me for lived examples of women who had crossed this threshold and had stories to tell. And I found there were none, that no one was speaking to this experience. And it's so interesting that, you know, a decade later, because next year will be Gateway Women's anniversary, 10th anniversary, I find that once again, I'm crossing a threshold and I'm looking for, you know, for those guides, those women who've gone ahead. And I know that many, many other childless women in their 50s and older are looking for the same. So I am so grateful for you to being here. Yes, Karen.
Jody, well, I had a question. I don't think it's really personal, but may I ask, were there any childless or child-free women in your family at all, older than you, you know?
No. I realized later I had one childless aunt, but I wasn't close to her, but I became close to her later. But I didn't know anyone in my family, my community, my colleagues, my extended family, in the public eye, amongst my acquaintances. I didn't know anybody who had wanted to become a mother and it hadn't worked out for them. I knew a couple of child-free women. I knew someone who had wanted to adopt, and she had. I knew someone who had difficulties conceiving and did IVF, and it worked. But I didn't know anyone, and I'm UK 1964 vintage. We were 1 in 4 of us didn't have kids, you know. So,
No,
Sue,
I
yeah,
just
and there were none like you. Like, where are they? I didn't know any. Yeah, Sue.
That's true, but
Oh.
I have come to realize over recent years that I really had 4 very close elders in my family who didn't have kids, who all wanted kids. And the oldest ones in their late 60s and 70s were the meddlers, you know, that, you know, told my mother what to do with my hair and you're not doing this right. And then they were all very melancholy about it.
Yeah.
And only one would admit happily to the world that she drank so much because she never had children. She had 3 husbands, but she never had children. And the husbands were no good, of course. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
I think Sue wanted to come in on that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I did have a couple in my family that never had children, but they didn't talk about it. My mother's favorite aunt, Aunt Edna, never had kids. And we just assumed in this family where everybody had children that she couldn't, but nobody ever spoke about it. And my dad's stepmother, whom I knew as my grandmother because my biological grandmother died when I was very little, she was married 3 times and she never had kids. She was an amazing grandmother to me. But again, we never spoke about it. I never said, Grandma Rachel, how come you never had kids? And now I wish to God I had, because she would have spoken to me about it. We would have discussed it. But you just didn't ask.
So can I ask the group? I'm sorry, Jody, am I allowed to ask the group question? Can I ask the group then, do you think that that's going back to Jody's question? Do you think that's something that our crone years will be different from the crones who came before us? Because we'll talk about this shit.
Yeah.
Jackie.
Jackie.
I really, this is something that I was really hoping we would get to talk about, because I had my great aunt Lena, who I write about, didn't have children. And I look back and I think, oh, I wish I could have known what her story was. We just didn't talk about it. We knew she adored us. But my mother said she was a bitter, lonely old woman. And which was one of the reasons why Mom pushed me to have children, because she didn't want me to end up like my great aunt Lena. And I know she had, you know, I just knew I felt adored by her, as I adore my own nieces. But nephews, one of the things that I think is so important is being able to speak about our own experience, so that people, you know, that we're seen. And because as I began to write and speak about my own experience, the people around me came to me and said, I didn't know that you had struggled. It just looked okay. It looked like you were okay. And I felt almost a kind of shame about my sadness. I don't think we make a lot of space for grief and sadness. And then there was also, I didn't want people messing in my business, was the other part of it, you know, like making my husband wrong, or trying to talk me into pushing in some way that I hadn't yet pushed. So telling that story for me has invited people in. And particularly one of the things I mentioned to this group is that I found that people reach out to me more. And it's the kind of thing, if you say, oh, you never tell me you love me, and then someone tells you, then your partner tells you they love you, you can't say, well, you only did that because I asked. I think take it in, ask for what you want. And then when people express the love that you're asking for, let it be there. So if someone begins to reach out to you on Mother's Day because you say, I also want this, or this is Aunt's Day, I want a card. And the card comes, love it.
Thank you. Kate.
Yeah, I sit there and I think about how come this happens that we have to go looking for people and then we have to be all nervous about it. And I think we have a level of arrested development that gets started because of the why. And so when we try to access some of these stories from the how come you don't have kids, that's like such a charged area to go into. But when we talk about the things like that all of us are talking about is how are our lives impacted? Oh my God, there's so many plug-in points to say, oh, well, several of us are single. Well, I went back in the dating world. I'm in my 60s. I don't have kids. Yikes. How do I roll into families like that? It's the how we're living our lives, where we've chosen to live, who's going to take care of us when we're older, who do we ask to take leadership roles in our elderhood, which that blew my mind. I was hemming and hawing, like, could you do this after my divorce? Would you? I did, maybe. And they're like, of course, are you asking me to play a role in your life? Yes, I'm honored to do that. You got to tell me what you want, lady, and I'll do it for you. Wow, I didn't know it mattered.
Oh, thank you, Kate Sue.
She just makes me think of a couple of things when they say, how come you don't have kids? There's an accusatory thing in there, like you screwed up, or and I also get, you don't like kids, right? You hate kids. And that's not true either. But people have assumptions. I am fortunate here on the coast to have numerous friends who don't have children for various reasons, but I don't feel quite so alone because they don't have kids either. That's very helpful.
Well, that was a brilliant start we got off to there. We didn't even get into our first question and we're off. So I'm just gonna, so here's my question. So what are you taking from the experience of living through, I'm going to say, the first year of the pandemic? I've certainly seen that pronatalism and singlism seem to have been like completely on steroids. It's made me very sad quite often how anyone who isn't young, white, heterosexual, able-bodied, coupled and childed has been invisibled by the media and policy making. And I'm just wondering, what has this year been like for you? And Donna, I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about your experience of lockdown in Melbourne, maybe, to kick us off.
Oh, look, can I preface it by saying it's such an incredible experience, and I don't mean that with a positive weighting, perhaps say awesome experience, and I'm not saying that with a positive weighting, but rather a kind of everything that all means awesome, overwhelming, intriguing, curious experience, at times frightening experience, because we had a very severe lockdown. I'm not sure, certainly the rest of Australia doesn't get what we went through, but we weren't allowed to go further than 5 kilometres from our house. We were only allowed to go out twice a day, once for exercise and once for shopping. There was a curfew from 8 o'clock in the evening till 6 o'clock in the morning, I think. So you had to do your exercise out there in the day rain instead of the gorgeous mornings and things like that you get in winter. So people fought it. We had to wear masks outside the house, just full stop. I couldn't exercise because I get asthma from wearing masks. So I have to say exercise is not my strong suit anyhow. So I didn't mind the excuse to just do a few power jumps in the house without a mask on. But I also couldn't have anyone in my house for 4 months. Not a tradesperson, not anything, no one. And we couldn't hug, we can't shake hands. Yes, and you only see each other's eyes, which I guess are the window to the soul. But there's a whole lot you didn't know you were missing out until it's gone. Very early days of lockdown, I had an experience where a tradie did come into the house because they had to get some plumbing fixed. And when he left, I felt like I'd been abused. It was like my private space had been intruded upon, and I felt as if someone had done something terrible to me. And they hadn't, they'd fixed my toilet, so that was good. It's a very, that's why I'm saying I haven't been able to really crystallize in my mind the real extent of this experience. But it has been remarkable. There's another part, sorry, I'm going to ramble a bit because it's a rambly kind of experience. You lose track of time, you lose your words. I'm not sure I'm getting them back because now I'm 66, maybe you lose them forever, those sorts of things. But also my thinking went wonky because it's blurred, and I guess it's a bit like solitary confinement in many ways. Except
and I think that's important. You know, you went through it alone.
Yes,
as a single childless woman, and this is an experience so many of Gateway Women's members have gone through.
Yes,
this is something that has been completely absent from the public narrative.
It's been, yes,
and people have done this alone.
Yeah, so I had these experiences, but I also had wonderful experiences. Like the council decided to put a cycle lane out the front of our house that meant that parked cars were driving into it. I don't even want to get into the rationality behind that, but we did have a major community, you know, action around it. And I got to meet a whole lot of people in my community I didn't even know existed. And a whole lot of people who are disgruntled with the council that I didn't know because I thought I was the only person. But also the other thing that happened, beautiful things, was that friends from all over the country and all over the world would ring me. I didn't have to worry about having a conversation every day, but I didn't have a real live human being in my house as regularly as I usually do. And that was a remarkable experience that I can't quite put words to. Now, what happened, the story that happened, like many stories and kind of positive things, wondrous things. I mean, it is an incredible experience, and we are going through a unique time that will go down in the history books. And if we're alive at that time, we'll be able to say, I lived through that. So that, you know, that in itself is wonder. Some days of wonder are darker than others. Mostly they're pretty amazing. I had a beautiful bedroom to sit in where the sun would come in every day and keep me warm. We have a program over here on our national broadcaster. Our national broadcaster is ABC, like you've got one in America, but ours is capital ABC, Australian Broadcasting Commission. It has a program every week called Q&A, or Quanda, because we Australians can't use any proper English words. Quanda, and it's a remarkable show because it has about 4 panelists who can range from the Prime Minister to a person walking in the street. And the people they take questions from people in the audience, and also video questions. We were doing a lot of video questions during lockdown, and I was watching it. It's kind of like the moment when the whole country sits down and watches what's going on in Australia and gets opinions about it. And a woman rang in to say, did a video question to say that people in Melbourne can't have anyone in their bubble. And why is this so? Her sister's in Melbourne doing it by herself, and she was in another state, and so she can't even go and see her sister. And at that point I wept. And I wept at that, you know, that weeping that you get when you realize that someone else is living this life too, that your experience is witnessed in a way. And so I wrote to Q&A and I said, this is happening to me too. And it was like, not a question, it was just a blurt, really. And in December, they were doing a wrap-up show, and they asked me if, they said, they contacted me and said they'd like me to ask the question, make a statement about this and ask a question of the panelists, how they found lockdown. I laughed. If you can go to ABC and see it, it's probably on my Facebook page or something, or on my website maybe. I laughed because I said my piece, which was basically, you know, how did you go through it? This is how it was for me. And the one person who really resonated with what I was saying was the sex worker. And I just thought, I just, and she's in Melbourne, and so she knew what it was like. But it was also the fact that sex work has got such complexities about relationship in it, and deep and meaningful connections, and really sort of distant, icy connections to get through your work. I just love that she was the only one that sat there and went, wow, I really get what she's talking about. So I don't even know what sense to make about that, but I loved that. But in the production of the process, the production crew had said, we've now found out about your book, we've now found out about this story, and we will be doing something in the new year on women's COVID, because COVID affected Australian women dramatically. We're calling it a pink recession here, because women's work is undervalued in this country, you know, surprise, surprise. And also domestic violence was just skyrocketed. And then they had these mysterious women who were living alone ringing up and saying, well, what about us? You know, do you want to talk about us for a moment instead of just always doing homeschooling or domestic violence? Both very valid issues, but really there's also this other stuff. But we have professionals talking about the mental health tsunami that's about to come as a result of this, as a result of the number of people doing it under such restricted, restrictions. There's going to be a tsunami of mental health issues, and I can see that there are, because I'm a normal person, you know, on the curve, and I was having, you know, some very interesting experiences that weren't drug induced. I wasn't used to that. You know?
And,
so,
I'm thinking also about the mental health side of it, that, you know, this kind of in the UK, and I've seen a lot of articles, you know, in other countries as well, you know, talking about the effects of isolation, the effects of loneliness, with no awareness that for some people, actually their life didn't change very much with COVID, because actually they've been living lives of actually quite restrained, restricted lives. Many of my members, for example, also manage chronic health conditions, and they're single, and they're childless, and they can't work because of it. And some of them have kind of carers who come in, and those carers were allowed to come in because of the pandemic. So even the very small amount of social and practical contact they had was gone. And still, as you say, it's still just nothing but homeschooling. And I know that parents have had it hard, but I would say, you know, there is room for more stories than just the parenthood story. And that's why, for me, it's been pronatalism on steroids. And actually, maybe there's a lot we can learn from those like us who live outside the mainstream, whether we're partnered or not. Because as women who don't have children, we know what it is to be different, to not be accepted, to be outside the mainstream. What I've seen in my members, and many of my members as well, is an incredible resilience that comes from years of this shit.
Well, and I think that really does pinpoints what the role of elders can be, because we have the opportunity to be bold. We have the opportunity to make ourselves vulnerable. And if we don't, then all we're doing is perpetuating the stigmas and stereotypes. And in this environment, if we can't air our voices, you know, I got to say shame on us. And that's a way to kick myself in the butt too, to say, put it out there plain. Don't mealy mouth it, just say it, because it's real. So.
Yeah, don't be quiet like those aunts and grandparents or whoever that didn't speak about it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think that the part about, I think a question a lot of people, younger people have, as they're facing, you know, what is my life going to be like as I get older without children? And that this, you know, your response, Kate, kind of feeds into that. Is I think it really comes to us. For me, it came as a responsibility to myself, but also to those that follow behind me, to open up the conversation and to have these people, like, you know, that I was, as I was beginning to write, was finding out about Jody and Sue and Karen, and then met Kate, for instance, along the way, that we all have been speaking out, and the conversation has just blossomed since then. You know, the fact that we're here, and, you know, I think pretty damn good representation of this is what the future can be like. And we also have a responsibility, I think, like you say, let's continue to speak out, and to ask people to join us in that process.
Actually, I wanted to go back to something there that we've talked about before, and which I've sort of formulated into a question, because this is something that comes up a lot. And I've been reading this book, Stephen Jenkinson's book, Come of Age, The Case for Elderhood in a Time of Trouble. It's quite a sort of gothic book in a way. He's quite an extraordinary user of language. Sometimes you have to kind of wade through to get to the points, but it's an amazing trip. And he talks about elders as needed for youngers. That the role, one of the main roles of elders is to be a resource for youngers, and that rather than elders being the past, you know, and sort of therefore past their sell-by date, we're actually the future, because in a way everyone's always talking about the future and what the future is going to come, and we are representatives of their futures. You know, it's like we have very valid information for them. And for many women that I know through the Gateway Women online community, there's actually a deep intergenerational divide within families, and they have very little access to develop relationships with younger generations. There's a hunger amongst these women to have those relationships and to contribute, but there's like, sometimes the nuclear family operates like a silo to kind of keep them out. In fact, Professor Rachel Trastill's book, How to Be Childless, which is actually a history book, talks about how modern and how fragile the nuclear family is, and how actually it's so fragile because only takes one parent to get ill or to lose their job or to leave for the whole enterprise to be really, really shaky, and how actually throughout history human kinship systems have been much more fluid than that and haven't always been about blood. And I remember when I was growing up, lots of people, I called them auntie, they weren't related. It's just, my roots are working class, and there was, the part of working class London where I'm from, I had a lot of aunties, and now you have to be blood related. So I'm thinking, in our roles as elder women, if we, how do you see your relationship with the young people in your life? And I think, what ways can you suggest to those who don't have those natural intergenerational connections? How do we go about creating those relationships?
I've got a lot to say, but I feel I've taken up space. What about you, Jackie?
Well, I feel like I've taken up some space here too, but part of it is that I do have, I have siblings with children. And so and I placed myself in their lives. I invited myself in actively and consistently, and I made the assumption that they wanted me there and that their parents wanted me there. Now, there were times when those children grew and created their own families, I began to feel excluded, because then the mothers weren't seeing me as help, they were seeing me as competition. So I was also aware of of the importance of reaching out and being present in other friends' lives who had children, just continually being a consistent presence in people's life, not just as a way of giving up because I got something back. If I wanted children, it also had to do with the comfort of holding a baby for me as magic. And I wanted to continue to do that. So I was getting something back as well as being a presence. But I also have continued I have a number of older young people in my life. And for instance, we've gotten a number of the kids in our life, this book, Who Am I? And it's a question book. It's from the School of Life. And we get together with them and have conversations out of that book. And so we go out into our garage, we have tea and coffee, and we sit out and have conversations. So it's inviting them to it's convincing ourselves that we're interesting and
That's,
letting them, and then also finding them interesting and engaging in that. We have a lot to teach. And so it's, for me, it's just about, kind of continuing to push myself and my own discomfort out and inviting people in.
yeah, that seems really, really crucial to me. One thing you said is you kept showing up, and you believing you had something to offer and also something to get from that. But I also hear that there were friends you did that with, but you had lots of kind of brothers and sisters with children. Many people of my age, including myself, have no siblings, or they have maybe one sibling and that sibling doesn't have children, or they don't go on, and there's kind of competition, and actually they don't want their childless sister around because their kids think she's cool and it pisses them off, or whatever it might be. But it's very interesting because also I trained as a child and adolescent psychotherapist, so I spent a lot of time with other people's children, and I think that really helped me to realize that I didn't need to be blood related to form these really beautiful connections with young people. But now that's not part of my work anymore, and also I'm slightly atomized because I'm not, living I'm not living consistently in Ireland yet, so I can't really build those new relationships with young people. It's like, how do I meet young people who aren't related to me? Yeah.
I don't know.
Maria?
Yeah. For me, when I look at elderhood, I mean, obviously we haven't had elders for a long time. And it goes back to what Kate said about arrested development. We do have a culture in a lot of the world, particularly the Western culture, that does have arrested development, where we do celebrate youth. And so we are put out to pasture at a very young age. I mean, you hear this over and over again, whether it's Hollywood actresses who are past their sell date at 25 or whatever. I mean, there's ridiculous ideas. So we don't have elderhood because we don't have a world that values it at all. And one of the
By the way, you've
reasons
just distilled the essence of this book, Maria, so you don't need to read it now.
oh, okay. So I guess the first thing I would say is that in order to have elders, you have to have to value maturity. And one of the things I've noticed in the pandemic is that we have been inundated with unwisdom in behavior. And unfortunately, it's been validated way too much, more of this arrested development. So if you did value people growing up and becoming mature, then elderhood is a natural next step. And so there isn't a big conflict around it. But we have that because we don't really believe in maturity. And to be an elder, to be mature, in my opinion, from what I've read about it, you have to have some regard for the common good. You have to be interested in contributing to a common good. And, as individuals who are childless, whether we were or not, we have a world that is trying to, with great difficulty, shift away from the capitalistic system into a world that wants to have a common good that we share together. So it seems to me that we have great potential to offer our wisdom as we make this shift from this culture into a new one. But I think it's a very difficult and rocky journey. I think there are young people out there who are interested in that we can engage with. But there will be some that really aren't interested in engaging with us because they're not interested in elderhood or even becoming mature.
And with the pace of change of the modern world being so fast, and everything, and new being the interesting thing, the future being the place all the time, that is a place which kind of, it devalues elderhood because it's about the new, and it sees old people, it confuses elderhood with obsolescence rather than wisdom. But also not everyone who gets old becomes an elder. And as Stephen Jenkinson says, we've had an explosion of older people in the West. We haven't seen an explosion of wisdom. Yeah.
No, but what I've been wanting to say, this sort of goes back a couple of comments ago, but also for this, is that in many past lives ago, I worked in television and not on air, behind the scenes. But I know, just as if you really are old like me, you know the Kerner report. But as the Kerner report stated years ago after President Kennedy was killed, it's about who's in the newsroom around the table.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this time of such new technology every 5 minutes, the bottom line is, even Huffington Post, you got an editor, there's a virtual table, but there's still a table. And that table doesn't have a woman at it of any, I won't say sweeping generalization, but probably doesn't have a woman at that table who is older than 33. Okay, and that 33-year-old may or may not be thinking, I don't want kids. But it doesn't matter, because up against the 33-year-old is a system of communication that has been going on since television and internet began. And if I sound a little emotional, y'all, it's because when I get up in the morning and I watch the morning news shows, I get angrier and angrier about it. And of course, no TV station would hire me now. But what they are doing is they are treating the current situation of the world and the pandemic as though it were just another year. If you really start being awake when you watch most newscasts, you'll see, the weather's getting worse and people are dying and ain't no hospital space. Bob, how about you? How are those Indians? I can't. And I noticed it in Halloween because they were doing stories on kids going trick-or-treating. And it was as though they hadn't heard the guy 20 minutes ago say, ain't nobody sending their kids trick-or-treating. It was a whole segment of, and you're going to have a party and you're going to make little pumpkin cookies. And I'm going, is anyone awake with that? So I throw all of that thought. That was that previous question about how we do in the culture, because the culture has been locked in its house, binging on the same old stereotypes that they've had all their lives. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Netflix or whatever, every once in a while you throw in somebody sexy, who's old. But other than that, if they are older, even Halle Berry, now she's popping out 2 kids, you know what I mean? So I would just say that one of the things that will make a difference is when there's real change of thought and acknowledging our voices. And so I guess we can never, ever, ever give up talking about what the reality is, because otherwise we'll just be one episode of a 13-week series and, okay, they took us out of the cardigan sweater. But other than that, nothing changed. Mm-hmm. There's something comedic about the childless aunt, that, she's coming over to tell us she ain't got no kids. There's something about reality shows, which I watch way too much of, where it seems that almost every show, sooner or later, one woman will say quietly or screaming, you don't have children, what do you know? Mm-hmm. And that's like a reality thing, whatever, but it is all part of the culture. And so now imagine it's post-pandemic and we actually have something to go back to. We got empty buildings because bosses have figured out, why am I paying for real estate when they working just fine out their house? We got these young kids who, I live next door to a girl who just started her freshman year of college. She was at college for a month and had to move back home. Now she's living in the attic. Her twin 7-year-old brothers they're on one computer in school. Her mom, who's a teacher, is in another. And I keep thinking, God forgive me, but I keep thinking, your freshman year of college is supposed to be swinging. All I think about is this girl over there in the attic going fucking crazy. So when we talk about, and I say this, I know it's funny, but it's also true, but I'm shutting up, Jody. All I'm trying to say is that no matter what I would advocate, that no matter what part of your life, whether it's this crone conversation or anything else that you're thinking about, what's going to happen next? Just remember that next can't be imagined, if you will. And so maybe as crones, we just make sure that we remind the youngers, the women, they have choices.
Okay.
Because if I had to predict, and I'd love to hear all of you predict something, if I had to predict one thing that I think will come out of this, it will be a pressure on younger women. You got to have kids. So many people have died. It's like the Holocaust. We got to replace people.
Oh God.
You know, and if that's the case, then all of us need to go on a boogie ride to go beat somebody up.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. That was brilliant. I can't wait to watch the recording so I can take all that in. Sue's been waiting for ages to get in, and then we'll come to Maria.
Karen, you're so soft-spoken. I love it. I was in the newspaper business, same thing. I was pushing 40 and they're like, she's a little old, you know? But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that was so long ago. I live in a community that's mostly older people. Everybody on my street, and they're all gone for the day now, so I'm the only human, but you know, I've been alone way before the pandemic, but I really don't have that many connections with younger people. I would like to, but I don't know how to do it. You know, I'm kind of shy and I don't know how to reach out to them. And I do feel like they look at me and go, oh, she's an old lady. You know, what does she know? She can't be cool. She's old. So it's tricky. You know, it really is tricky. And, you know, like Jackie said, I love to hold a baby. They are magical. You know, let me visit with them. Let me take care of them. But just making that connection with the younger people, I want to. They're fascinating. They're wonderful.
Mm.
But how to reach out and do that? It's a tricky thing.
Maria and then Kate.
Okay. So for me, I look at the situation and I think because women are living longer, they have so much more vitality. I think we should reimagine what a crone is. You know, the word crone is kind of interesting. It's a turnoff to a lot of people, but it's also kind of scratchy. And there's a woman by the name of Margaret Heffernan who did a TED talk on pecking orders and super chickens, and she talked about scratchiness as an important part of being authentic in your relationships. And there's something about being scratchy as opposed to being pleasant women. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if we can't reinvent the crone to be really feisty, scratchy, and also owning that part of the feminine that is totally separate from the masculine, can't be dominated. We're feisty, we have something to say, our experience matters. If we could reinvent crone, I think that might be a great service to the world.
Well, that's interesting. We'll go to Kate because I'd love to talk about that because I don't think we need to reinvent her. We need to rediscover.
Oh, okay.
Kate.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the question about ageism, I don't know. I'm just curious. I always have to calculate how old I am because as someone who doesn't have kids, all of us, we don't have those benchmarks that we don't freeze frame different eras of our lives. We just roll through them. And so I'm wondering, and I'm trying to do this more on my own, is I'm trying to put my character, my personality, my perspectives forward so that before or as soon as that little, oh, look, she's got whiter hair, she's got some wrinkles on her. It's like right before that cognitive thing happens, whoosh, I'm moving in with my personality, the things that I care about. And frankly, more and more, the fact that I don't have kids, so I don't know how old I am. So let me connect with you on the things that you actually care about.
Love you, Kate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna go to some of the questions, but I just wanted to talk about the crone quickly because it's really interesting. You know, we've kind of, you know, through a couple of things we've said, we've named ourselves the No-Mo crones. No-Mo is a word I invented, I don't know, a decade ago, which actually, I thought it sounded like a groovy district of New York. Karen came up with her own version independently, which was the NotMom. It was sort of the same thing. NO stands for not, MO stands for mother. So Nomo, not mom. And the Nomo crones. And the crone she's actually the shadow part of the goddess that's been suppressed by the patriarchy. So there's maiden, mother, and crone are the three kind of parts of the goddess. And the crone is the destroyer. It also means the crowned one. The crowned one. So if I'm always interested in etymology, and I'm a writer and I love words. And one of the reasons I love Donna's writing so much is because she loves mythology and words and etymology. I mean, your book is amazing, Donna. And it's interesting, if you look in an etymological dictionary, even quite a modern one, it will still only go back as far as where crone is still an insult. But actually, pre-Christianity, it was not an insult. And in non-Christian cultures, like, for example, the Hindu culture, they still have Kali. They have the destroyer goddess, the dark goddess. It is the dark feminine. It is that which comes at the end and which eats up and destroys everything so that creativity can happen. It's kind of it's basically like Karen was saying, and then Maria was saying, it's the part of the feminine that is not anything to do with the masculine. It is no longer, fertile or potentially fertile. It is not of interest to the male gaze. It is scratchy. It is loud. It is it's death and decay, but in its gloriousness, like autumn.
Can I give you a quick, first of all, an apology to all because I guffawed at the start of this, but I guffawed because as you talked about the destroyer component, all I could think was, it's the part of you that doesn't give a shit.
Absolutely.
That's just it, I mean, and I there was an old
truth teller. It's the truth teller.
Oprah or something years ago. It's the truth teller. It's the person who knows I could die tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We all knew it intellectually. Once you cross 60, 65, man, you can look as hot as you want to look, but I mean, that you could go tomorrow and you don't give a shit. You don't hold back as much. I can't remember which of our ladies was talking about how you got to get out there and you got to, ask for what you need. That's why old people get on our nerves, because they come right in your face. Well, I need you at my house on Tuesday, and they make us feel guilty and they don't care.
I think also, I think about being a crone as the sense of incredible power that travels through, if you like, the chakra channel through the body. I think I was saying in some correspondence with you all that Melbourne, this experience of lockdown in Melbourne has really kind of been a transition, if you like, even a ritual of awakening into being a crone. Because when you're in lockdown for that long, so our experience has been since March till now, and we've had a miraculous 100 days without any new cases. So we have no community transmission here. But our borders are blocked or cut off to New South Wales, who's having its second wave. But, we've gone through that together. And so not only have I connected miraculously with a community I didn't know was there, I now feel so much more embedded in my community. And also what's really, really weird about me, and I don't know whether this happens with other people, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's just me, but I can sit in a cafe minding my own business, doing my writing, and young people will come and talk to me. I kid you not. I have to remind myself not to flirt with the young men. Yeah, no, seriously, on Christmas Day, I was at friends with, well, I don't mind a little bit of, polite flirt, but I was at Christmas Day with friends of mine this year, and they had invited a young man. I hadn't even seen him as a young man, like he was in his late 30s, and very interesting, just graduated into criminal law. I was immediately absorbed in having a conversation with him. And then I thought, okay, Donna, just remember you're 30 years old. Just don't, don't do the full flirt. Yeah. So it's probably the first time I thought that, but I do have, I think there's an openness that comes when you have accepted the life that you are living as the life that you have been given to live, whether you like it or not. It's that move into this is how it is. There's only, as far as I know, 80 years tops. I don't know, maybe 90. The last 10 is going to be troublesome, you know, physically. But there's such a brief moment of this existence that we have. All of it is such a wonder. And I think once we get into that, we start to shine, and people come to us regardless of what our social structure is, whether we've got children or partners or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're glowing and if you're interested in the world and you're interested in that young man and his graduation into criminal law, or other friends of mine who are writers, who are filmmakers, all in their 30s and 40s, who turned up to my book launch and thought I was the coolest thing on the face of the planet. It was a shock to me. I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, lauding myself here, but it was a shock to me because I thought, well, I'm publishing a book that's got spinster in the title and people are thinking I'm cool. Okay, that's just an interesting paradox, isn't it? So just go with that. I think that's how you meet people. As Joseph Campbell said, you know, stay in your bliss. Yeah. Stay in your bliss and life comes rushing at you. And if life comes rushing at you, it doesn't matter what you think your failings are, because life just keeps telling you it's different. Yeah. Okay. The end. End of my lecture.
That was really good. That was
I'm gonna just move into a few questions, Jackie. If it, I'll give it to you for a moment.
Go ahead. That's
okay. I have a question. So this was sent in beforehand. Bit of a background. This is what the person says. I'm currently a member of an online painting course, and the tutor likened painting to having a baby, dealing with nappies, etc. I was faced with a bank of happy, nodding, smiling mum and granny faces, and of course, any mention of babies, and they all instantly feel connected. By the way, I know the person who wrote this, and she's in her mid-60s. The tutor over the weeks kept up her analogy of likening painting to having children, and others kept it going too. One woman posted a photo of a painting she's struggling with and wrote the comment, "Giving birth is hard." I understand the analogy, but personally, I don't like creative work likened to babies. I have over the years had too many people say to me that my creative work and now my paintings are my babies. I once called out a well-known artist and tutor for making the statement, "Never mind art, having a child is the ultimate act of creativity." To me, statements like that diminish creative acts, and I always point out that many of the world's greats didn't have children. Were their acts of creativity somehow less than a biological act? For me, creativity and biology are not comparable. Of course, giving birth and creating a child must feel like a miracle, but it's a biological act. Should it be held in higher esteem than a great work of art, be it painting, writing, music? How do you and the panel feel about your works being described as your babies? I have never liked it, but maybe that's just me.
wow.
I can't stand it, by the way. Can't stand it. I had a long conversation with one of my close friends who doesn't have children, but has pets. And that is where there's a legitimate comparison. When you're dealing with a difficult pet, that is, you know, and well, nappies, they, you know, potty training and all of that. That's parenting. Parenting is very different to creating something. Sure, there are some slight similarities, but once this is out in the world, I don't have to train it to be out in the world. And when I get older than I already am, it's not going to look after me or make a decision about whether I need to go into hospital. That's just not, it just doesn't work that way. So it's just maybe gestation, maybe when it comes into the world, there's something, but it is not anything like getting married or anything like having children. Sorry, passionate about that one.
Thank you.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maria too. Lots of people want to share. Maria.
I'm a painter, among other things, and I'm an oil painter. And I went to art school about 15 years ago. I never heard a single person describe painting or any other form of artwork as if it was the same thing as having a child. Never once. So I think it's totally BS. Tell Frida Kahlo and people like Georgia O'Keeffe that you know their creativity wasn't worth all that much. Neither of them had children. What BS?
Yeah, people often say to me, well, Gateway Women is your baby.
Oh yeah.
I've been told the same thing.
I just think, really, is that all you can say about this? You know, Sue.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And my books are not my babies, much as I love them. It's my vocation, it's my art, but it's not my babies. They will never grow up and hug me or talk to me or learn from me or take care of me when I get old and sick. I didn't create a person. That's a whole different thing. Books are different.
Jackie?
Well, I really think that the process of creating a book, or like I'm learning music and how to write and writing songs, and that for me is, it's a completely different experience than what my body might be capable of doing or might not have been capable of doing. I think it's just they're so different, and I react so strongly against the idea of the magic. I've used magic about holding a baby earlier, but the idea that it's this thing that you did and you created by having a child. No, that's something that the body does naturally, but it wasn't the work of producing a work of art. It feels so different to me. It involved my mind in a very different way.
But
And
don't you think that quite often some other people say that because they're trying to, like, they know you don't have a child, so they're trying to say, look, see, you do.
You have this.
People say that to me. It's basically, but look, it's like when someone says to me, oh, you would have been a wonderful mother.
Yeah.
I've got a great line back for that now. I said, you would have made a wonderful childless woman.
Yes.
Love it.
Like,
boy, that'll get you punched out in some
and they don't even quite know what to make of it, because it just gives it back to them, and they're like, oh, but I didn't mean us. On we go. But it's basically a kind of, what a shame you're not one of us.
Oh,
one of us.
And I'm like, take your pity and leave.
Yeah. I think it's a poverty.
But very politely in English.
Yeah. I think it's a poverty of thinking that the only metaphors that they have are the ones that affect their lives daily. And look, we're richer than that because we have many metaphors to describe another person's kind of life. And so, in a way, I think I have a bit of pity that the only metaphor that they can come up with about my work is that
I guess maybe also it's still this idea that there's a universalization to it. Some of the questions that we won't have time to get to in the chat are about childlessness in the workplace again. And so often one of the things I hear from members is they're in sort of workplace trainings and all kinds of professional settings, and the trainer uses parenting metaphors to explain something, completely confident that this is a universal experience. And also Saint Brene Brown, my God, that woman uses parenting as a metaphor for everything. I forgive her because she's so brilliant, but God, I wish she'd, stop drinking that pronatalist Kool-Aid. Kate.
I think that's where we have an opportunity to step forward with that and say, let me just compare and contrast this for you. Is I hear you talking about the focus on the 1 or 2 or 7 kids that you have. Is your experience of where you're focusing your energy. My experience is my energy is focused on a very broad brush, and I have slices of all different kinds of people at all different stages in their lives that creates for me a perspective that is altogether different. It's not better or worse. It's just different.
That's the thing. It's not a competition.
It's not. There's room for all of us. It's valuable space that we all occupy.
But there's, and I don't know why, and it's not every person, of course, but there are moms out there who, in a way, it feels like they're just sort of waiting on you to push the stick off my shoulder. You know, I say that because I was thinking sweet thoughts about the dog that's in the hospital. I can't remember whose dog, sorry. And I was thinking about how you have to, you know, really understand that she's really hurting, you know, over this dog. But quite often I'm totally losing it. Menopause took it away. Tell the youngers that's what happened.
Okay. I'm going to jump back into another question.
Wow,
So-
it just went through my head.
Don't worry,
It
mine
was
tend to
really
lap,
good.
they lap the room sometimes, they come back, so. So
Blame it on COVID. Blame it on COVID.
blame it on the boogie, blame it on COVID. So I wonder, this is a question, if I could get your thoughts about what the best way for all of us is to get our childless voices heard and to be seen as the powerful, insightful women that we are in a way that is revelatory instead of pitying or threatening. And this is also from a woman who I know who is in her early 60s. So in a way that is revelatory instead of pitying or threatening. I'm not sure the Crone's got much time for those distinctions. What do you think?
Oh yes, no, crying. So I'm sorry, racing off the first kid off the block here, but no, the Crone absolutely has a responsibility to deliver the message with integrity and grace. And certainly we need to be scratchy when time calls for scratchiness. But I think, you know, people don't change unless, well, they change for two reasons. One, that they have been emotionally affected. That's when transformation occurs. If you want someone to be emotionally affected, scratching their eyes out is not going to do it. They're just going to hate you. So what you need to do is find compassion and respect, all those sorts of ways of delivering your message. I think about the myth of Inanna in particular, ancient Sumerian goddess who decided to go and visit. She was called Queen of Heaven, and she decided to go and visit her sister Erekshigal in hell. And when before she left, she said to the sun god, "Please, if I'm not back in 3 days, come and get me, send help." Well, she wasn't back in 3 days because her sister, who was grieving the death of her husband, was so annoyed to see Erekshigal was so annoyed to see Inanna down there in hell, she impaled her on a stick. And Inanna was in the process of dying. 3 days later, some little spirits come down. Now, what those spirits did to save the situation is what is crucial here. They supported the grieving Erekshigal. They soothed her. Now, this is what a lot of mothers and family people are complaining about, the burden of their hell. And you coming in as the Queen of Heaven are going to get impaled. The trick is to have the elves or the spirits that can soothe and can appreciate the situation. And then there's space to talk about yours. Now, there's some of us who are going to say, I want to come in with mine first.
I love the idea of that, but something I've experienced and a lot of women I know have experienced is that they do go in with compassion. They do offer a lot of support. And then nothing comes back. They create that space, that support. But then when they want it, or when they try to open that conversation to talk about their own experience, they're shamed and shut down and shut out.
It's true.
It does seem to be very difficult to get that dialogue.
Yes, it takes a lot. It
Yeah.
takes being Crone to do it. The strength. It's taken me a long time, and you can be hurt, or you. But if that friendship's really important to you, then you just keep at it. Yeah.
And I think also I couldn't do it when I was grieving. I was too tender.
And a lot
No.
of women want to do that when really they need their elders, they need advocates to be kind of paving the way for them, because they're too vulnerable. They're on a stick, they're already impaled on a stick.
Yes, yes.
Sue.
Yeah, when I was, I couldn't do it either. When I was late 30s, early 40s, I was so angry, at so many things. But the only way to really communicate as elders, I think somehow we need to be not sorry for ourselves and not angry, but calmly, this is how it turned out. This is okay. We actually have a life that is not 100% about not having children. That's a good part of it, but there's so much more, But yeah, it's very hard when you're younger to be calm. But when you're an elder, you can look at it with perspective and say, okay, this is how it turned out. It's probably how it should have turned out. And we're okay, and we're just as cool as those moms too.
I think that's really important, and it's been an important learning for me to realize that my life is not better or worse than being a mother. It's like to me it's just a different, messy, imperfect human experience of life that I'm having. I'm having this one rather than the motherhood one, but they're equally of value. And it's just pronatalism that says that that's not true, but it's not my experience. It's not my experience of childless women. It's not my experience of those mothers that are good friends, including those ones I haven't yet met. They can see that too. They can see past the stereotypes. Now, unbelievably, we have 2 minutes left, ladies.
I just want to say, I know that there are a number of people who had questions on the Q&A that we didn't get to. And at least for me, you can reach me at my website, JackieShannonHollis.com. I'm happy to have, email me, I'll have a conversation. And I think there are a number of really great resources here.
Yeah, thank you. Just so you know, most of the unanswered questions, I'm also very sorry we couldn't get to them. I can see that all of them are women who are members of the Gateway Women online community. So we can continue the conversation there as well. So now I'm going to have to bring this amazing conversation to an end. Can you believe that was an hour and a half? So thank you.
Go on all day.
I know, to Jackie Shannon Hollis, to Kate Kaufman, to Sue Fagaldi-Lick, Karen Malone Wright, Donna Ward, Maria Hill, and our love and blessings to Stella Duffy, who wasn't able to be with us. And we will meet it's the last full moon of 2020. So it seems like a very nice time to meet around the cauldron. So thank you. Thank you for stirring the cauldron with us today. And I hope to see you all again soon. And stay well, stay healthy in 2021. And I hope that the support of your elders and your childless sisters around the world helps you get through whatever you're dealing with. We are here for you. So please reach out. 2021. Yeah. Jackie, do you want to say a couple of words to say goodbye?
I've just been so happy to be here with all of you and with the people who are listening and chatting at the conversations. I've dipped in on those and been like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on here and so much to respond to. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Jackie. Kate?
Thank you for this, Jody.
Oh, you're very welcome, Jackie. Thank you.
Absolute thanks. And let's keep the conversation going. And when we can't keep the conversation going, let's keep the listening going.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kate.
That was very nice. I just want to do this again with you guys, and we will become the golden girls who actually have wisdom.
Thank you, Karen. Sue?
Yes, thank you so much for including me in this. This has been very fun. And yes, I look forward to doing it again. You can look for me on childlessbymarriage.com. And there's a lot of us out there. Don't feel alone. Talk about it. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't hide.
Thank you. Donna?
Oh, thank you so much. It's always a privilege to be involved with you and your projects, Jodie. Thank you for this incredible event and doing it on Facebook as well. I don't know how you do all that. And thanks everyone else. It's always great. It's great to always, like we've only done it twice, but it's been great, and I hope that it goes on for always. And thank you to everyone who's been chatting and asking questions, and I wish you all the best for 2021, and may you stay safe and strong and a little cronish. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Maria.
Oh, well, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed the laughs along with the discussion. That's great. Having a sense of humor is important. I hope everyone has a great new year. I'll look forward to a next call. And Sue, I hope everything goes well with your dog.
Yeah, sending
Yes,
love to your dog, Sue. And if you're watching this and you immediately want to know who everyone is and follow some websites, if you go to the Gateway Women website, so that's gateway-women.com, click on Childless Elderwomen, you'll find the websites and the books and everything of everyone who's been on the chat. So lots and lots of love to you all from the No-Mo Crones, stirring the cauldron, signing off. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.